My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. My parents deliberately excluded me from our grand family reunion, the first one in over a decade. They wanted to make a statement, to put me in my place as the family failure. What they didn't know was that the entire five-star hotel venue, the gourmet catering, the live band, and the open bar were all courtesy of an anonymous benefactor who was about to be revealed. And that benefactor was me. I remember the day of the reunion so clearly. Not because I was there, but because I wasn't. I was sitting in my apartment, the one they called my sad little box, scrolling through the pictures my cousin was posting on social media. There was my father, beaming, raising a glass of champagne that cost $400 a bottle, a champagne I had personally selected. There was my mother, draped in a new designer dress, standing under a floral archway of orchids and roses that I had spent weeks designing with the florist. She was laughing with my Aunt Carol, the same aunt who once told me I'd never amount to anything unless I married rich. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Every detail of the event was a ghost of my own making. The string quartet playing Vivaldi in the grand ballroom? I'd auditioned them myself. The custom-designed cake with the family crest on it? I'd sketched it on a napkin and sent it to the best baker in the state. I had orchestrated this entire symphony of family togetherness from the shadows, all while being told I wasn't welcome to hear the music. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, rattling against my cold cup of tea. It was my older sister, Melissa. Of course it was. She was the golden child, the lawyer with the perfect husband, and 2 perfect children. She was my parents' pride and my personal tormentor. I let it ring for a moment, gathering my strength, then answered with a calm, even voice. "Hello, Melissa?" "Clara, oh my God, you would not believe this place," she gushed, her voice loud over the background noise of chatter and music. "It's absolutely incredible. Dad was just saying he has no idea who this mysterious benefactor is, but they must be some kind of billionaire. Everything is just perfect." "I'm glad you're all having a good time," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "Oh, we are! It's just a shame you couldn't be here," she said, the fake sympathy dripping from her words. "Mom told everyone you were too swamped with your little online business. You know, to save you the embarrassment of having to explain it." My little online business was a tech startup that had just secured its 3rd round of funding. But to them, anything that wasn't a traditional, respectable profession like law or medicine was a hobby, a failure. "That was thoughtful of her," I replied, tracing the rim of my teacup. "Totally. Anyway, everyone's been asking about this secret donor. People are guessing it's one of Dad's old business partners trying to impress him. It's all very exciting. You can't buy this kind of class, you know," she said, and I almost laughed. "Oh, but you can, Melissa. I have the receipts to prove it." She went on for another 10 minutes, describing the food I'd tasted, the wine I'd chosen, the people I knew she despised but was currently flattering. Every word was a carefully aimed dart, meant to remind me of what I was missing, of the world I wasn't a part of. She wanted me to feel small, isolated, and pathetic. And for a moment, sitting there in the quiet of my apartment, I did. That old, familiar ache of not being enough settled deep in my bones. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider by your own family? That feeling of being on the other side of a window, watching a life you're supposed to be a part of but are locked out from? Share your story in the comments below. Knowing you're not the only one can be the first step to building your own door. And be sure to subscribe, because my story was far from over. The real party was just about to begin. Hanging up the phone with Melissa, the silence in my apartment felt heavy, thick with the ghosts of 1,000 similar conversations. Her casual cruelty wasn't a new invention for the reunion. It was a cornerstone of our family's architecture, and I was the designated load-bearing wall of disappointment they had built their perfect lives upon. It started young, as these things always do. Melissa was the sunbeam, the child who colored inside the lines, who got perfect grades, who never questioned. I was the storm cloud, the one who saw the lines as suggestions, who asked why the sky was blue and then why that answer wasn't good enough, whose creativity was always mistaken for messiness. I remember being 8 years old and spending a whole weekend building an elaborate diorama of a Martian colony out of cardboard boxes, tin foil, and old radio parts. I was so proud of it. I'd even rigged a little red LED to blink on the main habitat. That same weekend, Melissa had practiced her cursive until it was flawless, a perfect replica of the teacher's example. My mother framed Melissa's handwriting sample and hung it in the hallway. My Martian colony was put in the garage because it was cluttering up the living room. That was the first time I understood. In my family, predictable perfection would always be valued over messy, ambitious creation. This dynamic only hardened as we got older. In high school, Melissa was the captain of the debate team, president of the student council, the face of every respectable club that looked good on a college application. Her path was a straight, paved road to success, and my parents lined it with cheering and applause. My path was a winding dirt trail through the woods. I wasn't interested in student government. I was in the computer lab, teaching myself to code. I spent my weekends at hackathons, not school dances. The year Melissa won the state debate championship, they threw a massive party for her. That same year, I won a national coding competition. My prize was a check for $5,000 and a summer internship with a software company. When I told my parents, my father patted me on the head and said, "That's nice, Clara. Just make sure your little computer hobby doesn't interfere with your real studies." The ultimate betrayal, the moment the crack in our foundation became a chasm, was when I told them I wasn't going to law school. I had been accepted into the same prestigious university as Melissa, and the plan, their plan, was for me to follow in her footsteps. Instead, I told them I was taking the $5,000 I'd won, along with my savings from the internship, and I was going to start my own company. I had an idea for a logistics optimization software that could revolutionize the shipping industry. I tried to explain it to them in my father's study, my voice filled with passion and excitement. He listened with a stony expression, my mother wringing her hands beside him. When I finished, he didn't ask a single question about the software. He just sighed, leaned back in his leather chair, and said the words that would echo in my head for years. "Clara, there are two paths in life. There is the path of success, the one your sister is on, which provides security, respect, and a proud family name. And then there is the path of foolish dreams. You are choosing a hobby over a career. You are choosing fantasy over reality." He made me an offer. He would pay my full law school tuition, no questions asked, but he would not give me 1 single cent for my internet scheme. He said he refused to fund my failure, so I did it alone. The first few years were brutal. I lived on instant noodles in a tiny apartment, working 18-hour days. Every family dinner I was forced to attend was an interrogation. "Are you making any money yet? Have you thought about getting a real job? Melissa just made partner at her firm. Isn't that wonderful?" My small victories were dismissed. My struggles were seen as inevitable proof of their judgment. When I finally secured my first round of venture capital funding, a significant 7-figure sum, my mother's only comment was, "Oh, so you found someone to give you a handout? Do be careful they don't take advantage of you, dear." The idea for the reunion came from my mother a few months ago. She called me, giddy with excitement. "We're finally doing it. A proper Maxwell family reunion. At the Grand Imperial Hotel." I felt a cautious flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe now that my company was visibly successful, I would finally be seen. I asked when it was, ready to clear my schedule. Her voice dropped. "Oh, Clara," she began, adopting that tone of saccharine pity she used when she was about to be cruel. "Listen, darling, this is going to be a very exclusive affair. Your father is inviting some very important people. Old colleagues, potential investors for his firm. It's all about projecting the right image, you understand. And with your unconventional career, and you being single, we just thought it would be less awkward for everyone, especially you, if you didn't have to face all those questions. We're just trying to protect you." I was being disinvited from my own family for being an embarrassment. The irony was that in the same breath, she asked me, "You work in that tech world. You must know people. Do you have a contact for a top-tier event coordinator? Someone truly world-class?" I almost laughed. My company was famous for its launch events, spectacles of creativity and precision that I designed myself. But she didn't see me. She just saw my connections. I gave her the name of my best contractor, a woman named Maria, who I'd worked with for years. And in that moment, as I stared at the phone after she'd hung up, the seed of a new idea began to sprout in the barren ground of my disappointment. An idea that was messy, ambitious, and all my own. That conversation with my mother was the flint, but the steel that struck the spark came a week later. I called Maria, my event coordinator, both to give her a heads up that my mother might be calling and to apologize in advance. Maria had been with me since my company was just 3 people in a rented office space. She was more than a contractor. She was a friend. She knew my family story. "So, my mother wants a world-class reunion," I told her over coffee. "But apparently, her world-class daughter isn't on the guest list." Maria just shook her head, a wry smile on her face. "Clara, their loss is always my gain. Let her call. I'll handle it." And she did. My mother called Maria the next day, and according to Maria, she laid out her grand vision. The best hotel, the finest food, a string quartet, a famous local band, everything top shelf. Maria, ever the professional, drew up a preliminary budget based on my mother's champagne tastes. The total came to just north of $250,000. Maria emailed it to my mother and father. The turning point, the real moment the entire scheme was born, happened when Maria forwarded me their email exchange. I was expecting my mother to call her, horrified, to scale things back, but that's not what happened. My father replied to the email. It was short, dismissive, and accidentally sent to Maria instead of just to my mother. He had meant to reply only to her. The email read, "Margaret, this is absurd. We can't afford 1/10 of this. The firm is on shaky ground, you know that. We'll have to cancel the whole thing. It's too embarrassing. Unless you think Clara's little startup has finally produced some real money she'd be willing to loan us for the sake of the family's reputation. Maybe you can convince her." I stared at the words on my screen. The firm is on shaky ground. My father, the titan of industry, whose success was the golden standard I could never meet, was in trouble. He, who had refused to fund my foolish dream because it wasn't a sure thing, was now on a path of failure himself. And his first instinct wasn't to be honest, but to consider hitting up the daughter he had consistently belittled and ostracized. He wouldn't even ask me himself. He wanted my mother to manipulate me into paying for a party I wasn't invited to, all to maintain the illusion of his success. It was the hypocrisy that finally broke me. It wasn't just about being excluded anymore. It was about the entire rotten foundation of our family dynamic. Their success was a facade. Their pride was a performance. Their concern for me was a lie to cover their own insecurities. For years, I had been chasing their approval, trying to prove my worth in a system where the rules were designed for me to fail. And in that moment, reading that email, I realized I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove anything. The game was rigged. So I decided to change the game. I sat back in my chair, the anger and hurt solidifying into something cold, clear, and powerful. A plan. I wasn't going to let them cancel it, and I certainly wasn't going to give them a loan. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, but on my terms. I was going to fund the entire, extravagant $250,000 affair. I was going to build their stage, set their props, and write their script. They wanted to project an image of wealth and success. I would give them an image so dazzling it would blind them. I picked up the phone and called Maria back. "Maria," I said, my voice steady and calm. "About my mother's reunion. I have a new idea. I want you to call her back and tell her you've found a benefactor, an anonymous one, someone who wants to cover the entire cost of the event, no strings attached." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard Maria's slow smile through the phone. "An anonymous benefactor?" "Yes," I confirmed. "The only condition is that you, and only you, are in charge of every single detail. They give you the guest list, and you handle the rest. They are not to be bothered with the planning or the cost. It's a gift." "And who is this mysterious, generous soul?" Maria asked, already knowing the answer. She's a woman who believes that family is important, I said, a smile finally breaking across my own face. And she also believes that sometimes the best way to protect your reputation is to let the truth speak for itself. You and I, Maria, we're going to plan the party of the century. This was no longer about getting back at them. It was about taking back my own story. They had written me as the failure, the disappointment, the family secret. I was about to write a new chapter, the one where the secret becomes the star of the show. The next 2 months were a masterclass in covert operations. On the surface, I was just Clara, the daughter with the little online business, dutifully staying out of the way. But behind the scenes, I was the architect of their greatest social triumph. My days were spent running my company, but my evenings and weekends were a whirlwind of secret meetings with Maria, vendor calls, and meticulous planning. It was exhilarating. For the first time, my creativity wasn't being dismissed as messy. It was being weaponized. Maria played her part to perfection. She called my mother and delivered the news of the anonymous benefactor. My mother, according to Maria, was initially suspicious, then overwhelmingly ecstatic. The idea that some wealthy, powerful figure was so impressed by my father that they would drop $250,000 on his family party was the ultimate validation. It confirmed every delusion of grandeur she held. My father, equally thrilled, didn't question it for a second. His ego wouldn't allow him to. Of course, people wanted to lavish money on him. It was his due. They handed over the guest list, and from that moment on, they were merely attendees. Maria and I took control. We didn't just meet their expectations, we surpassed them in every conceivable way. The Grand Imperial Hotel's presidential suite for the ballroom, we booked it. The celebrity chef they'd joked about affording, I hired him for a private tasting menu. The vintage champagne my father loved, I bought out the supplier's remaining stock for the state. Every decision was filtered through a single question. What would impress them the most? What would make them feel like the royalty they so desperately believed they were? I became a connoisseur of my own family's desires. I knew my mother adored Casablanca lilies, so I had them flown in from Holland and arranged in towering displays that filled the ballroom with their scent. I knew my father fancied himself a man of letters, so I commissioned a calligrapher to handwrite every place card and menu in elegant script. I knew my sister Melissa was fiercely competitive about her children, so I arranged for a separate, professionally staffed children's party in an adjacent suite with magicians, video games, and a candy bar that would make Willy Wonka jealous. It was a party so spectacular, her kids would talk about it for years, a subtle jab at her own parenting skills. During this time, my interactions with my family were surreal. They were so consumed by the upcoming event, so high on the fumes of their perceived importance, that they barely registered my existence beyond the occasional pitying phone call. "Oh, Clara, you simply won't believe it," my mother would trill. The benefactor, Maria calls them the patron, is insisting on an ice sculpture, a giant swan. Can you imagine? I would murmur something non-committal, all while looking at the design proofs for that very swan on my laptop screen. The true genius of the plan, however, wasn't just in the extravagance. It was in the details I wove into the fabric of the event, details only I would understand. The string quartet wasn't just playing Vivaldi. I had them arrange a special piece, an instrumental version of a song I wrote on the piano when I was 15. A song my mother had told me was morose and unladylike. The signature cocktail for the evening was named The Alchemist, a nod to my first successful piece of code, which I'd named after the book. The parting gift for every guest was a small, beautifully packaged box containing a custom-blended tea. The blend was called Vindication. I was also gathering my ammunition. My company had recently closed a major deal with a logistics conglomerate based in Germany, a deal that put our valuation into the 10-figure range. The press release was slated to go out the day after the reunion. I had my PR team time it perfectly. While my family was nursing their hangovers, my name would be in the Wall Street Journal, not as a hobbyist, but as one of the most successful young CEOs in the tech industry. The final piece of preparation was personal. 2 days before the event, I went shopping. I didn't buy a simple dress. I went to the same designer my mother had bought her dress from, I knew because she'd bragged about it, and I commissioned a custom gown. It was a showstopper. a column of midnight blue silk that was both elegant and powerful. It was the kind of dress a woman wears when she owns the room. I laid it out on my bed, next to the single invitation I had printed for myself. It didn't say Clara Maxwell. It said, The Patron. My armor was ready. My stage was set. All I had to do was wait for the curtain to rise. I made my entrance at exactly 9 p.m., the time I had arranged with Maria for the big reveal. The party was in full swing. The band was playing, champagne was flowing, and the sound of laughter and self-congratulation filled the air. I paused at the grand entrance to the ballroom, taking it all in. My parents were holding court near the ice swan, my father puffing out his chest as he accepted compliments on his event, my mother glowing with pride. Melissa was nearby, looking smug. They were the picture of success, a portrait I had painted for them. I took a deep breath and walked into the room. My arrival didn't cause a ripple at first, just a few distant cousins nodding politely, assuming I was a +1 who had arrived late. But as I moved through the crowd, a path started to clear. People saw the dress, the confidence, the way I walked as if I belonged there, because I did. I owned every lily, every flute of champagne, every note of music in that room. The first of my family to see me was my Aunt Carol. Her jaw literally dropped, her glass of wine freezing halfway to her lips. Her expression was a mixture of shock and confusion. I just smiled at her and kept walking. Then Melissa spotted me. Her eyes widened, and the smug smile on her face evaporated. She immediately strode over to me, her expression thunderous. "Clara, what are you doing here? You weren't invited. This is a private event." "Oh, I think you'll find I am," I said calmly, my voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. I didn't stop, forcing her to walk alongside me as I continued my slow, deliberate path toward our parents. "How did you even get in?" "You're going to embarrass Mom and Dad," she hissed, grabbing my arm. I stopped and looked down at her hand, then back up at her face. I didn't say a word. I just raised an eyebrow. She let go as if she'd been burned. By now my parents had seen me. My mother's face went pale, her smile faltering. My father's expression hardened into a mask of pure fury. He started toward me, ready to read me the riot act, to publicly humiliate me and have me thrown out. This was the moment. Just as he reached me, the band finished their song. A hush fell over the room as Maria stepped up to the microphone on the stage. This was our cue. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice warm and commanding. "I hope you are all enjoying this wonderful celebration of the Maxwell family." A polite round of applause. "As you know," she continued, "this incredible evening was made possible by the generosity of a single anonymous benefactor, a patron who wished to honor this family in a truly special way." The room was buzzing. People were looking around, whispering, trying to guess who it could be. My father straightened his tie, a small, expectant smile playing on his lips. He thought this was his moment of glory. "The patron has been deeply moved by the Maxwell family's story," Maria went on, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. "A story of ambition, of perception, and of what it truly means to succeed. They wanted this event to be a testament to that, and tonight they have decided to reveal themselves." Every eye in the room was now on the stage. My father looked like a child on Christmas morning. My mother clutched his arm, her eyes wide with anticipation. Melissa stood frozen a few feet away from me, a dawning horror on her face as she finally started to connect the dots. "Please join me in offering a heartfelt thank you," Maria announced, her voice ringing through the ballroom, "to the sole sponsor of this entire event, the woman whose vision and generosity made all of this possible, Ms. Clara Maxwell." Maria gestured directly to me. A spotlight I had prearranged with the lighting crew snapped on, bathing me in a brilliant white light. For a full 10 seconds, there was absolute, stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. 150 pairs of eyes swiveled from the stage to me. Then the murmuring started, a wave of confusion and disbelief. I just stood there, letting them look, letting the reality sink in. I met my father's gaze. The color had drained from his face. His mouth was slightly agape, his eyes wide with a combination of shock and utter horror. My mother looked as if she was going to faint. Her hand flew to her chest, and she stared at me as if I were a ghost. My father took a shaky step forward. This is a joke," he stammered, his voice hoarse. "This is some kind of sick joke." "It's no joke, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent room. "I have the receipts." I gave a small, deliberate nod to Maria. On the two large screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of family photos, a new image appeared. A scanned copy of the final invoice from the Grand Imperial Hotel for $257,482.19, marked "Paid in full by my company, Alchemy Corp., with my signature clearly visible at the bottom. A collective gasp went through the room. The silence was broken. The power dynamic of my entire life had just been shattered in a single, glorious, devastating moment. I was no longer the outcast. I was the host, and my family were merely my guests. The aftermath of the reveal was pure, unadulterated chaos. The room erupted in a cacophony of whispers, pointed fingers, and frantic questions. The narrative they had all been sold, that of the powerful patriarch being honored by his peers, had combusted before their very eyes. They were now attending a party thrown by the family reject, paid for by the little online business they had all privately mocked. My father stood rooted to the spot, his face a grotesque mask of rage and humiliation. My mother began to weep silently, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, not out of sorrow for me, but for the destruction of her perfect evening. Melissa, for the first time in her life, looked utterly lost. Her entire worldview, built on the foundation of being the superior sibling, had crumbled. I walked over to the microphone Maria had gracefully abandoned for me. "I just wanted to say a few words," I began, my voice amplified throughout the now silent ballroom. For my entire life, I was taught that there was only one path to success, a path I was told I was not on. I looked directly at my father. I was told my dreams were foolish, my ambitions a hobby. I was deemed an embarrassment, not worthy of being included in a family celebration meant to project an image of success. An image, it turns out, that was more fragile than anyone knew. I let that sink in. I could see some of my father's business associates in the crowd, shifting uncomfortably. The mention of his fragile image, coupled with the lavishness of the party he clearly couldn't afford, was starting to paint a very clear picture for them. "So I decided to help with that image," I continued, my tone even, almost conversational. "I provided the venue, the food, the music, all the trappings of success you see around you. Consider it a gift from the failure in the family. Because my definition of success isn't about projecting an image. It's about building something real." I paused. "And since I wasn't formally invited, I'll see myself out. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. You've already RSVP'd to my party." And with that, I placed the microphone back on its stand, turned, and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The silence behind me was more satisfying than any shouting match could ever be. I could feel their burning stares on my back, a mixture of awe, resentment, and grudging respect. I walked through the grand lobby of the hotel, my head held high, and stepped out into the cool night air. I had never felt so free. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The next morning, as scheduled, the press release about my company's multi-billion-dollar acquisition deal hit the news wires. My face was on the homepage of Forbes and Bloomberg. My little online business was the talk of the financial world. The contrast between my public triumph and my family's private humiliation was stark. My father's shaky firm, which relied heavily on his reputation, took a massive hit. The story of the reunion spread like wildfire through their social and professional circles. He wasn't seen as a powerful man being honored. He was seen as a fraud who was publicly exposed by his own daughter. Several of the potential investors he had invited to the reunion quietly pulled back. His path of success had led to a dead end. My mother stopped calling. There were no more pitying invitations or backhanded compliments. There was just silence. My Aunt Carol tried to call me once, likely to attempt some form of clumsy apology now that I was the wealthy one, but I didn't answer. Melissa sent me a single, 2-word text message. "I'm sorry." I didn't know if she was sorry for how she'd treated me, or just sorry she'd backed the wrong horse her entire life. It didn't matter. I deleted it without replying. The power they had held over me for 3 decades was gone. It had been an illusion, built on their own narrow definitions of worth and propped up by my desperate need for their validation. By taking control of the narrative, by refusing to be their scapegoat any longer, I had dismantled the entire structure. They hadn't excluded me from their world. They had just given me the opportunity to show them that I had built my own. And mine was bigger, brighter, and built on a foundation of truth. I didn't need a seat at their table anymore. I had built the whole damn dining room. It's been 6 months since the reunion. The silence from my family has been deafening, but peaceful. I moved out of the sad little box they pitied me for, and into a penthouse apartment overlooking the city. From my window, I can see the lights of the Grand Imperial Hotel, but it no longer holds any power over me. It's just a building, a landmark from a past life. What I did wasn't really about revenge. Not in the end. It was about liberation. For years, I had allowed their definition of me to become my reality. I was the difficult one, the strange one, the one who would never measure up. The weight of that label was heavier than any business failure I ever experienced. The reunion was just the final crushing straw that forced me to stand up straight and shrug it all off. I realized that seeking validation from people who are committed to misunderstanding you is a fool's errand. You can't win a game that's rigged against you, so you have to stop playing and create your own. I learned that true strength isn't about fitting into a pre-made mold. It's about having the courage to break it and build something new from the pieces, something that is uniquely yours. My father's path of success was a performance, dependent on the applause of others. My path, the one he called a foolish dream, led to something tangible, something real. It led to me. I don't know if my family will ever truly understand what they lost. It wasn't just about money or status. They lost a daughter, a sister, who would have moved heaven and earth for them if they had only shown her a fraction of the respect they so freely gave to strangers. But some lessons can only be learned through loss. They have to live with the consequences of their choices, and I have to live with the freedom of mine. And I can tell you, freedom is a much lighter burden to carry. If this story of finding justice and reclaiming your power resonated with you, please hit that like button so it can reach others who might need to hear it. The most important lesson I learned is that you define your own worth. Don't ever let anyone else hold that pen. Thank you for listening to my story. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of turning the tables and finding your voice.